In the vast, unforgiving expanse of a sun-bleached desert, where the horizon shimmered with heat and silence, hung heavy two women. Becky and Shiloh set out on a daring mission that would push them to the edge of survival. Becky, once a fearless climber with a spark in her eyes, was now a ghost of her former self, haunted by the tragic loss of her husband Dan, who met a horrific end during a mountain climb a year prior. The memory of that day was seared into her soul. Dan, reaching into a small cave for a better grip, startled by a bird losing his balance and dangling from a rope as Becky and their friend Shiloh fought desperately to save him, but the rope snapped, and before their horrified eyes Dan plummeted to his death, leaving Becky shattered. Now a year later, her life was a blur of empty bottles and sleepless nights. Her apartment, a cluttered shrine to her grief, alcohol had become her only solace, numbing the pain, but not the memories. Her father James, a kind but weary man, watched his daughter unravel, his heart breaking with every failed attempt to pull her back. Becky, Dan would want you to live, he pleaded, his voice trembling, but Becky, lost in her despair, couldn't hear him. One stormy night, as she sat alone staring at a bottle and contemplating an irreversible choice, her phone buzzed with a call that would change everything. It was Shiloh, her old climbing partner, now a vibrant YouTuber whose climbing vlogs inspired thousands. Sent by James. Shiloh's voice crackled with determination over the line. Becky, I know you're hurting, but I've got a plan to bring you back. Let's climb again, something big, something epic, she proposed, scaling a 20,000-foot abandoned radio tower in a remote desert, a relic of forgotten times, rusted and perilous. Becky's first instinct was to refuse. Climbing was tied to Dan's death, a wound too raw to touch. But Shiloh's words cut through. Sometimes we need a reason to move on, a challenge to remind us who we are. This is yours, Becky, for Dan. Her heart wavered, torn between fear and a flicker of the old fire that once defined her. After a long tear-streaked pause, she agreed, packing her climbing gear with trembling hands. The next morning they hit the road, their car cutting through endless dunes under a blazing sun. As they drove, Becky scrolled through Shiloh's phone, pausing at a photo of Shiloh with a man's arm draped over her shoulder. "Who's this?" she asked, curious. Shiloh's smile faltered her reply, curt, "Just a friend." The evasion hung in the air, but Becky let it go when a call from her dad lit up the screen. She ignored it, not ready to face his worry. They stopped at a dusty roadside hotel, its neon sign flickering in the twilight. Over dinner, a weathered waiter pointed to the tower's silhouette in the distance, warning that thing's a death trap, been abandoned for decades. Shiloh grinned, unfazed, while Becky's stomach knotted. That night in their cramped hotel room, Becky dreamed of Dan, his laugh, his gentle touch during quiet moments, only to wake with tears soaking her pillow, clutching the urn of his ashes she'd brought along. Dawn broke, and Shiloh was already in vlogger mode, filming their journey with a GoPro and drone. "What's up, adventure fam? We're about to conquer a 20,000-foot beast," she announced, her energy infectious. But a near collision with a truck caused by Shiloh's distracted filming snapped them back to reality. Becky's glare was met with Shiloh's sheepish laugh. They reached a locked gate with a "No trespassing" sign, forcing them to abandon their car and trek through the scorching desert. the landscape was eerie sand stretched endlessly, broken only by a decaying animal carcass swarmed by vultures. Shiloh snapped a photo for Instagram, captioning it, "Fear is just a stepping stone." Becky forced a smile, her nerves fraying. The tower loomed ahead, a rusted giant swaying in the wind, its ladder trembling with every gust. They tied themselves together with safety ropes, Shiloh leading with unwavering confidence, Becky following with her heart pounding. Each step was a gamble. The ladder creaked, bolts were loose, and rust flaked off in their hands. Halfway up, a step snapped under Becky's foot, sending her lurching backward. She screamed, clinging to the rope, her vision swimming as the ground spun 10,000 feet below. Shiloh's voice cut through the panic, "You're stronger than this, Becky. Keep going." Gritting her teeth, Becky pushed on. But the tower's decay was relentless. Another bolt clattered to the ground, unnoticed in their focus at 18800 feet. They reached the end of the inner ladder, facing the final 200 feet on exposed outer stairs, battered by fierce winds. Shiloh teased Becky, shaking the ladder playfully, oblivious to another bolt falling into the abyss. They navigated a massive rusted dish antenna, Shiloh bounding across with ease, while Becky moved cautiously, her breath shallow. After hours of grueling effort, they reached the summit, a tiny swaying platform 20,000 feet above the desert. The view was breathtaking, cacti and dunes reduced to specks, the horizon endless. Shiloh unleashed her drone, filming epic shots for a vlog, even dangling one-handed off the tower's edge, her laughter echoing, "Your turn, Becky," she called, handing her the drone remote. Terrified but emboldened, Becky gripped Shiloh's hand and leaned out, her heart racing as adrenaline surged. For the first time in a year, she felt alive, the weight of her grief lifting. In a quiet, sacred moment, she opened Dan's urn, scattering his ashes into the wind. "I love you," she whispered, tears streaming as Shiloh squeezed her shoulder, both women sharing a silent tribute. But their triumph was fleeting. As they prepared to descend, they rechecked their safety ropes. Becky, taking the lead, her foot touched the first rung of the outer ladder, and then cracked. The final bolts gave way, and the entire section collapsed with a deafening groan, tumbling into the void below. Becky dangled from the ropes, screaming as Shiloh hauled her back to the platform. They were trapped 20,000 feet up on a crumbling sliver of metal barely big enough to stand on, with no food, no water, and no one for miles in the desolate wasteland. The wind howled, the tower groaned, and their fight for survival began, a test of courage, ingenuity, and the unbreakable bond between them. Would they find a way down, or would the tower become their tomb?